Today I'm out in the shop replacing the differential cover and gear lube on my 2005 F-150 Lariat with a 5.4 liter engine. But this applies to any 8.8 rear end, 9.75 rear end like I have here, or the Ford 10.25 inch rear end. The Ford 9.75 inch axle is slightly smaller version of the Ford 10.25 inch Sterling axle and features a 9.75 inch diameter ring gear with 34 spline semi-floating axle shafts, while its bigger brother is found under full-size Ford trucks. The 9.75 inch model came as standard equipment under almost every modern 97 through current Ford F-150 and every 1997 to 2014 Expedition. There have been changes over the years. The ring and pinion gears changed in 2011, but will still fit the older axles with the proper conversion bearings. So they're all very similar. And we're just talking about changing the gear lube today. But I'm also changing the rear cover. You can see how rusty mine is. Tools and consumables I need to do this job include a 1/2 inch deep well 6-point socket, maybe an extension, not absolutely necessary, an impact driver, a light, some kind of light source. To remove the fill plug, you need a 3/8, either 3/8 ratchet or an adapter for your 1/2 inch drive ratchet. That's what I prefer to use. A gasket scraper, or in my case a putty knife, some air source to blow off the debris from around the axle housing. I'm going to replace my rear diff cover, so I've got a Dorman differential cover which I sanded, applied lacquer thinner to clean it, and then applied engine paint and cooked it. That process is outlined in one of my shop tips where I talk about applying engine paint to fasteners, so be sure to check out that video. I'll put a link in the video description to that video. Consumables you need, there's some way to clean up the old gasket material. So either a Scotch-Brite pad, you can get these at the parts store, or either that or the grocery store, Scotch-Brite green pads, or the same thing that's on a sponge, it's blue, some shop rags or other old rags to keep debris out of the rear end, gear lube, and this is the 15W140 Mobile 1 gear lube, and then some parts cleaner. Ford says to use 75W140 synthetic gear lube in their rear end, and that's for the 8.8 or the 9.75, which I have. It requires 5.5 pints or 2.75 quarts, or if you have the 10.25 inch rear end, which some trucks have, it also requires the same 75W140 synthetic gear lube. And you can either use the Motorcraft or the Mobile 1 like I'm using, and the 10.25 rear end requires 6.9 pints or 3.45 quarts. And here you can see the conversion to liters if you're interested in liters. And since I'm here on the page, the front axle, if you're changing the lube in the front axle, Ford is saying 75W90, but it's also acceptable to put the 75W140 in the front end. I assume that's because the front end doesn't get used as much, or maybe it gets used in the winter more, is what they originally recommended that for that. But currently they're recommending the 75W140 in the front end also, and that requires 3.75 pints or 1.88 quarts, and then 2 liters. Also remember, if your truck has a limited slip rear end, make sure you add the friction modifier, and you add that to the first quart that you're putting it in, and make sure you mix it up. So put a little bit in off your first quart, put this in, mix it up, and then add that first into your rear end. And that's only if you have the friction disc traction lock rear end from Ford. I also like to use a lacquer thinner to clean up the old gasket material on the diff cover flange and on the rear axle housing. This helps get the gasket material off by softening the gasket material. You also need a drain pan, and when you're filling, it's very helpful to have a piece of vinyl hose. This is 5/8 vinyl hose that I've made with a fitting, brass fitting, to go on to this particular can, or in the regular oil, plastic oil cans I've made with this cap with a brass fitting. For the Mobile One containers, they have this kind of a nipple on them that you can just cut. So once you've trimmed it, the vinyl hose just fits over the top of it. It fits fairly snug, and you can squeeze it off into the rear axle housing, into the fill hole, and this will just fit. This 5/8 vinyl will just fit inside there. If you don't have the vinyl tubing, you can cut this off and attempt to squeeze it in there, but you're going to end up making a mess. So this allows you to get inside the axle housing, and so you're depositing the oil inside instead of right on the edge of the lip where it'll run out. And this is very expensive. I got these on sale for about $20 a quart, and normally they're like $38. So you want to preserve as much of this gear lube as possible. We're going to start by removing the 12 1/2-inch diameter head size bolts. And on some trucks there's brackets attached to the bolts, or ABS cabling attached to some of the bolts. So some of the bolts have studs. On my truck I don't have any of that. I just have all bolts. And these are 1/2-inch head size bolts. Leave at least one of these bolts in at the top so that the pan can hang from that while it's draining, because the pan, the oil, the lube level is up to here. So I think I'm gonna leave this one right up in the center back in. Now you can see I left some of those in just in case it popped on me. I don't have them all loose yet. But let's see what it does. They're usually stuck pretty hard because there's a lot of surface area for gasket material. So that one's about halfway screwed back in. And I'm going to use my putty knife to make sure I have my pan underneath. And I'm going to find a lip here to start with. There it is. The truck doesn't have to be jacked up, but I like to start with it, at least with the chassis jacked up and the rear axle hanging a little bit. Gives you more clearance here so you don't have to remove the spare tire. Go. You just want to get it up underneath that pan between those two flat surfaces. There, she's starting to leak. There she goes. Nice. Make sure you have your pan underneath when it goes. So this one stuck pretty hard even at the top. Sometimes they'll just pop completely loose. That's why you want to keep that last bolt in there. I'm going to take that bolt out. And this pan is junk. I believe it's got a hole in it. And I'm going to let that drain. And then we'll start cleaning up the flange. So here's a sidebar when we're talking about these diff covers. I'll go on the computer and show you some different diff covers here. We'll pause just for a second and I'll explain some of the different diff covers. But you want to take the diff cover off so that you can clean this sump. There's a sump down underneath this gear, underneath the ring gear, down in here that you want to clean out. You know, clean that thoroughly. And if you have a diff cover that just has a drain hole in it, it's not going to drain everything out. You can see there's still that much lube down in the bottom of this one. Here's what I'm talking about as a quick sidebar. If you go to the Summit Racing page, used to spend quite a bit of money on Summit Racing. I like their the company. I like their parts, the selection, and this great service. So here's a Ford Performance Parts rear differential cover, and you can see the drain here on the bottom, and you can tell that it's not going to drain everything. So that's what I'm talking about. It's got a couple of fill ports, which is nice. Now if you're off-roading and you know you're going through water and you need to drive home for 100 miles or more, and you want to change out your rear diff lube, then it's easy to drain it this way. But still, you want to take that cover off so you can clean that sump out. Now here's another example. Looks like, I don't know where the drain is, right there. This one looks like maybe you modify that rear flange and it's got the drain right there. So that one's a little nicer. This one, this G2, I don't know that company very well. It looks like a nice differential cover. But on my F250 I had one of these flat rear differential covers that held more, 2 more quarts. So it hold like, I don't know, 6 quarts or something. And before you purchase one of these, I know that sounds like a good idea. It's they boast improved cooling, and this one here does have fins on it for improved cooling, but the air doesn't flow back here. And here again, there's the drain underneath here, and you have to get over that flange. But before you buy one of these, make sure you go to the Gale Banks website and look at their rear diff covers. Look at their YouTube videos on their clear covers that they did so that they could experiment and show the way the fluid moves inside your differential, around the differential and inside the axle housing, before you purchase one of these. So let's get back to the job. As this continues to drain, I'm going to clean up some of this old gasket material with my this is a putty knife, but it's been sharpened, so it's a little bit more like a chisel. It's not extremely sharp right now, but it does feel like it's grabbing pretty good on the surface, which is good. don't want to get anything, any metal flakes or anything inside. I'm trying to clean this. I want to put in clean fluid. But if I get a little gasket material in it right now, it's probably not going to hurt, because I'm going to clean this thoroughly, and I'm going to try to scoop out all that oil out of that sump area. As it continues to drain, I'm going to go with a little lacquer thinner on a green pad and start cleaning up the flange here. I don't know if you could see that, how well the gasket material just came off right there. There, all the gasket material just came off. So what I want to have is a good clean surface. So what I want to do is start with lacquer thinner and finish up with lacquer thinner. So even if I use a parts cleaner on it, I want to follow up with a lacquer thinner to make sure I got a good clean surface, because even the parts cleaner can leave a little bit of a oily residue, and I don't want that. I want a good surface that my new gasket material can stick to. So here you can see how much is down in that sump. And I'm going to try to scoop that out and wash it out with brake cleaner eventually. That's where all the larger particles that don't get picked up by the magnet that's on the diff cover are going to go right in this little pocket here, this little sump underneath the ring gear. I'm attempting to clean in stages, so as get cleaner and cleaner. I'm making sure I'm wearing my safety glasses. I'm gonna use a little air and blow out all these mounting holes. You can see I'm getting a little bit of gasket material out of there. Just about there. We take a clean rag with clean lacquer thinner on it and wipe it down one more time, and that's going to be my surface that my RTV is going to seal against. And I think I'll do it one more time. My bolts I soaked in lacquer thinner, then hit with a wire brush, and to clean the threads, clean all that RTV off the threads, I used a black Maximum Flex gasket maker. Now this is used for engines, for oil pans and stuff like that, so it's a little higher temperature than the regular gray, but it's also got the oil resistance and Maximum Flex. So anyway, I like to use RTV. It's probably a little better grade than what it needs to be, and just put it on as a continuous bead on the inside, and then I like to go back and put just a little bead on the outside of the holes so that I get a nice even squeeze on the lip, especially since this particular diff cover doesn't have a lip on the outside. It's just got that flat flange on it. Some of them have a little bit of a lip on them, and I think they're a little stiffer. This one doesn't have that. So what I want to do is make sure I have one of my bolts handy and position the cover up and on right on the holes and hold it so it doesn't move, and I'll let the bolts do the work to squeeze the RTV out. So I don't want to smear it. I could have smeared it with my fingers if I wanted it to distribute it around the flange, but I don't want to do that. I'm going to let the bolts squeeze that RTV out. So I'm going to start a bunch of bolts. Oh, I hold that on. And as I'm holding it centered on the bolt holes, I'm going to go ahead and tighten up one or two here so that it holds it. And I don't want to over tighten them at this time. I'm going to try to tighten them in kind of a cross pattern. And once we tighten these will be torqued to 35 foot-pounds. So that's all of them torqued to 35 foot-pounds. Now we need to let this RTV cure for about an hour. The Permatex website says for 24 hours. If we had 24 hours, we just let it set overnight. But in most cases, we're not going to have 24 hours. So I'm going to let it set up for an hour and go do something else. And then we'll come back and we'll fill it with that 75W 140 lube. The fill plug on the left side of the axle housing or the pumpkin, and I'm going to hit it with a little air, clean it, and then a little parts cleaner, and that's a 3/8 square, so 3/8 drive ratchet or adapter to use my 1/2-inch drive on it. And that's all there is to it. It's just a pipe thread plug. I believe those are just pipe threads on it. I'm going to throw that in my tub of lacquer thinner and then hit it with a wire brush. And that plug is magnetic, so you see the particles that have collected on it. Make sure you wipe it off good. So here we go. Here's what I came up with, right? Here's the 5/8 vinyl tube. And press it on there so it fits tight. And just pour it in. You can squeeze. It's cold out today, so I put my bottles in a little bit of warm water so that the gear lube flows a little easier. So all I do is put it up so it drains. So remember what I said earlier, it was 5.5 pints is what Ford's saying. That's what 2 and 2.75, 2 3/4 quarts, something like that, whatever I said earlier. Go. This is the 4th one, but the first one was only a partial. I think it was about a little over half, 3/4 of the way full, so I thought that would probably do it. But probably a little bit off. So we should be coming to the full here in a little bit. There we go. I think we're getting a drip. Check it quick. Yeah, I think so. Getting there. There we go. There, it's running out. It's okay, we get some of that. Oop. Yep, looks good. So I'm not going to use thread sealer on my plug. You can tell I used more than a wire brush. I used a wire wheel on it to clean it up. It was pretty dirty. But I'm going to use a little bit of RTV on it. Same stuff I used on the diff cover. That on it. So this is tightened to something like 22 foot-pounds or something. It's not a lot. Doesn't have to be, just snug it up. That's all it needs, especially since it has a little bit of sealant on it. And to clean up the whole oil there, little parts cleaner. So to make sure it's not leaking. After a quick test drive. Of course, a little bit of gear lube on my axle housing probably wouldn't be a bad thing. Keep it from rusting so bad. But I just want to make sure I'm not leaking. Clean up the bottom of the pumpkin here. Axle housing. So that's it. That concludes the video. All I have to do is let the vehicle down off the jack stands, clean up the shop, annotate this in the maintenance logbook for this vehicle, and I'm done with this project. So that concludes the video. If you found it helpful, let me know in the comments, and please subscribe. I look forward to your comments.